What I'll do is I'll quickly first walk you through some of the pointers that we have for this entire week. What did we cover so far? I'll do a quick recap, and then I will introduce all of you to our today's speaker, Pavan. And after that, Pavan is going to talk about a very interesting topic. So give me a moment before I kind of get there. So, as all of you have been attending this session since the last week, we started off last Sunday, and this entire week has been quite eventful with a lot of knowledge and ideas being shared across the board from different product managers from different companies having different problems. Okay, and very unique kind of topics were discussed, and all of them had their own set of informative ideas that all of you can possibly implement back at your workplaces as well. Now, we had peers from different companies like Byju's, PhonePe, Frazo, Bounce, Spinny. Okay, and today we have Pavan from Flipkart, and yesterday we had from Red Hat as well. So what kind of topics did all of these speakers, the wonderful speakers that you see on my screen, so what kind of topics did they kind of cover in this entire week? So if you look at it, we started off with First Principles by Shailendra Nath, followed by How Do You Break Into Product Management by Shravan, followed by What Time PM by Venkat. Then we had Innovation and Creativity that Mohan discussed. He was from PhonePe. Then what are the expectations and mantras for success that startups look out for? And this was done by Sneha. Finally, yesterday we had Mohit Suman talking about a little technical side of product management. And finally, today we have Pavan, who's a senior product manager at Flipkart. He's going to talk about how do you decode complexities back here in India. India is an awesome market because the number of opportunities and the depth and width of opportunities is like almost infinite. And we are just growing in this. We have just gotten started. We have just scratched the surface with so many awesome Indian product companies doing so well worldwide. It's time for India to now take up the focus, and going forward, India is going to kind of lead this way and kind of solve major problems and hurdles across the globe. But again, as charity begins from home, okay, what we have to see is, okay, how can we first do it back here in India? India is a very complex market. India is a market which is like probably dreaded by a lot of companies. A lot of products came and they failed. Okay, so how do you really solve complex problems back here in India is something that Pawan is going to touch base today. And with that, I think I'll not take any further time of yours, Pawan. Let's get started with our session today, Pawan. I hope you're able to hear me, Pawan, as well.
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay, perfect. So, yeah, so Pawan seems to have lost some weight here. Uh, so anyway, so decoding complexities for growth back here in India. I would love to hear from you, Pawan. So over to you. And yeah, our entire audience is all excited to learn from you.
As I am.
Okay, and thank you for accepting our invite and coming here to share your knowledge. Thank you.
Absolutely. Privileged to be here.
Okay, over to you, Pawan.
Thank you, Suchet. Thank you so much for having me over. I looked at some of the other talks and other sessions that we had. Amazing sort of conversations, amazing dialogue. And all of the people who spoke to you guys so far are people I've admired for a long time. On LinkedIn, I've been following them. Off LinkedIn, also I've sort of been following their work. So they're really some of the best leaders in the industry. So I think Suchit has done a great job of sort of like assembling some of the best people to talk to you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed a lot of that. What we'll do is this session is going to be slightly different from the other sessions. I think other sessions spoke about product management as a function and how we can sort of like break into it or become better as product managers. In this session, we're going to be slightly more focused on building products. Like if you were to build products and grow them, how would you sort of like go about that? So we'll sort of like spend time on that. And what I want to do is I want to sort of like keep this as a dialogue. So if there are like thoughts, comments, ideas, do keep sort of like typing. I'll sort of like check in once in a while. Also, I have several questions once in a while. Do sort of like share your thoughts, opinions in those time. Cool. Now, without further ado, let's jump in. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah, Pawan, it's visible. If you, yeah, okay. Presentation will be great, yeah.
Cool. So, right. So now let's just take a look at India as a market, right? If you look at 2021, right, 2021 this year all the way till now, the sum of investments in the startups for the first time in several decades has actually been higher than it has been in China. China was like the growth hub for all these years. For the first time, we've seen that the venture capital has started pursuing the companies within India. Now, why is that, right? So if you break down the Indian journey so far, right, you can look at it as three distinct phases. The first phase was where we sort of like set up ITES companies and we started building for American citizens. They would come and they'll tell this is what I want and we build for them. The second phase was slightly more recently where we started solving for problems within India, right? You will find companies like Zomato, BookMyShow, all of these are homegrown companies who are building for India, limited exposure to external countries. Then comes the current day and age where we are not just building for India, but for the whole world. And you'll see that companies like the recent ones that went for IPO, right? Just top of my mind, the B2B SaaS companies are sort of like all over the place. And they are sort of like going IPO in NASDAQ and all of these places. So we're building for India, but really for the world. So how do you sort of like tap into the growth market within India as well as for the world? But we'll sort of specifically go deeper into India, because the complexities here are massive. Now, before we jump into the product management itself and building and designing technologies, let's just take a look at how it has been so far. Let's jump out of software, let's jump out of our digital products and just take a look at what's happening right now. So Ford quit India. This again is very recent news, right? This got me thinking, right? This was really interesting for me because Ford had invested about $2 billion, right? And if you look at Ford, right, it's not a small company. It is a market leader in certain segments like pickup trucks. In pickup trucks, they're a market leader. And it's not like that. They're like, hey, let's just sort of like try something in India. If it does not work out, it's okay, we'll give up. They stayed put for 25 years in India. They tried several things for 25 years and they still could not succeed. Which was like, wow, this is interesting. Why is a company as amazing as Ford not able to succeed in India? And it's not just India, there are other companies also. But we'll spend some time on Ford, try to understand what really we could learn from this journey, right? And I want to sort of like break this down into three phases. The Ford journey so far. So go back in time, 1990s, we sort of like opening up our economies. So 1995, Ford is like, hey, India is an amazing market. We need to sort of get into this action. So they sort of enter into the market. So what did they do? They launched this product that you can see right now, right? It's called the Ford Escort. Let's try and understand what this product is. This is a sedan. This is the lowest sort of spectrum in the sort of like products that they had in the US. But even that product was very pricey for Indians. Obviously, that's not going to sell in India. So what did they do? They said, hey, we need to sort of like make this easier and more economical. How do we do that? So they sort of like removed the power steering. Then for the rear seats, they removed the power windows as well. Okay. Now, what do you think happened? Like in the chat, can you just tell me whether this product works or not? Like yes or a no, just yes or a no. Yeah, I see a lot of people saying no. I see one or two yeses, right? Yeah, I think largely this entire product failed in India, right? This product did not succeed in India. And what is the learning that Ford had from this? Ford is like, hey, you know what? If we take a global product, just cut corners and just force fit it for India, it's not working out. Like, we need to sort of like build for India ground up. That is when the second phase started. Right? Second phase, I think you would probably remember this. It's called the Ford Icon. They had like an amazing branding for it, the Josh machine. Back in 2000, this was a viral hit. There were like good ads, innovative ads as well. The marketing campaign, go to market, was really good. Now, let's try and think about this particular product. Right? This particular product was the first made in India car. This came out of the Marai Malai Nagar factory, and they'd set up like a factory in India, and they're locally sourced components. Significant part of it was even manufactured in India. It was not just assembly. Some parts were still imported, but a large parts were made within India. What happens because of that? As a result, you have a much more economical car, primarily because you sort of like produced within India, not imported, and hence it's not cutting corners as well. What happened because of that? The car was amazing in that particular segment that it was one of the best products, but it still had a high cost of ownership, right? What happened with what do you mean by high cost of ownership? A lot of people who had Ford Icons would go to service center, they would say, hey, I know AC is not working, and then they would be slapped with some 20,000 rupees bill. uh, that's obviously a lot. Exactly, yeah, I see Rahul is mentioning that maintenance was a pain. Yeah, absolutely, there are a lot of stories. If you just type Ford Icon maintenance, you'll see a lot of people sharing their pains, telling, hey, it is very costly, it's an unnecessary pain to own this product. What happened because of this? What happened is, though it was like an amazing hit in that particular segment, they could not sustain the growth. They could not continue to sell this product. It was a hit in 2000, 1990s, 2001, maybe 2002, but after that, they couldn't sustain the growth. And it became a branding problem for Ford. Ford is equal to very high cost of ownership. Ford is equal to very high maintenance. The lesson there is the definition of value goes beyond transaction, right? It's not just I'm selling a car and I'm done. That's not the Indian user, consumer builds a relationship with the brand and the product, and that relationship goes beyond just that particular transaction, right? So we'll look at what did Ford do next. Ford then said, hey, you know what? We still need to go cheaper. The way we can make maintenance cheaper is where we can sort of like, we can ensure that we get in the mass segment. For that, we'll need to produce a lot of cars. So the cost per maintaining a car goes down. Very rational, right? If you have large capex, if you can sort of like distribute it over large volumes of cars, your overall cost per car comes down. Very sensible thought, very reasonable approach to this. And what they did is they first invested in rebranding themselves. If you sort of can go back in some time, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, they invested in Prakash Raj and a bunch of these leading actors. And they said, like, hey, don't stick with perception. People feel like it's very costly. It's not actually. The cost of ownership is as low as 3,400. And I think that benchmark this against some of the other cars, but it was a little too late to sort of change the brand perception. And Ford Figo itself had certain problems, right? Ford Figo goes head to head with Maruti's business, Maruti and Hyundai, right? Maruti and Hyundai are market leaders in Class B, Class C sort of cars. They have like Swift, Alto, and all of these cars, which are like amazing cars. What happens when you go head to head with these biggies, right? They could not succeed. They could not succeed against Maruti's fuel economy or Hyundai's fuel economy. These people had done distribution. They had like, if your Maruti car breaks down somewhere in the middle of nowhere, you will still have a Maruti service center authorized by Maruti somewhere nearby. And hence this sort of like Me Too strategy did not work out for them. Yeah, I think I sort of like answered why Maruti could not copy. Kumar, I guess I answered your question. Let me just take a look at the chat. Yeah, absolutely. Best products plus value, right? Value, definition of value is what sort of like what we're sort of like going after. Definition of value is not easy. And understanding and defining that value is sort of like the most important part. Cool. So let's jump into, this is an interesting story, but how does it apply for digital product managers? We'll sort of jump into that right now. Cool. So let's try and decode this Indian users. Okay. Now what we're going to do is, Ford really was not able to understand who is this Indian consumer that they're sort of like building for. Who is this person that I'm building for was not clear. And hence a lot of the strategies could not sort of like pan out. If you look at the successful companies in India, Maruti, Hyundai, or even in other domains like the FMCG, Unilever, all of these companies ITC do an amazing job of having their ear very close to the ground in India. I'll give you a different story, right? In Bengal, not West Bengal, the Bengal in Bangladesh, there was a product which is like a baked potato sliced, and it was a chip, right? This was a snack. It comes in like a 7 to 10 rupee pack. It has about 5 to 10 chips. It became a raging hit. This happened 3 months ago. Raging hit all over India. People from the Hindi belt in the northern part where they could access this particular product was an amazing hit. Everybody liked it. Now, even before this became a big hit, ITC was able to launch All-Rounder, which was a competitive product in the same segment within a matter of month or month and a half, right? You see the response time for somebody like ITC who needs to set up manufacturing, sourcing, distribution, etc. They were actually able to launch the product to compete with in this segment within a month. They were able to understand something has changed. There is a new need in the market. Somebody else is capturing it. I will go after it. Right. So how do you sort of like develop this spider sense around who these customers are, and how do you understand and empathize with them slightly more deeply, right? Now let's break down this as a product manager. If you're a product manager who's going to build for India, let's understand who this India segment is. Obviously, India is a very diverse nation. We have 600 million internet users. Depending on which report you read, this is between 600 and 700. Who are these 600 million internet users? Who are these users, right? Obviously, India is a very diverse economy, very diverse set of segments. You can segment it across price, you can segment them across age, you can segment them across which part of the country they live in, cities, metros, T1, T2, T3, towns, all of these places you can sort of like, is there a question? You just type your questions in Q&A, I'll sort of like be able to answer that. Yeah. So you can sort of like segment these users in any number of these sort of like dimensions. What I have done here is I have not actually taken a very hard dimension to segment these users. Think of it as like k-means clustering, which is like I sort of like try and cluster these users around multiple dimensions, and let's look at what are the most concentrated pockets and who these are. Aisha, if you have a question, could you please chat? Could you just type it in the Q&A? I'll sort of like answer that. Yeah, I see Saransh is talking about vernacular and states. Yeah, absolutely. Very, very correct. Like there are a lot of diversity among these users. So let's try and understand who these segments are. The first segment is what I like to call as the you and me segment, right? You and me segment is the segment that is very similar to you and me. The reason why I call this is a lot of times when you experience apps, you sort of like think about it from your own perspective, from your own sort of like mindset, and you sort of like go ahead and tell you, this works, this does not work, etc. And you take like a product call and say, this is like a good interaction, this is a bad interaction, you sort of ship it. And then after you ship it, it doesn't work. And then you're like, what happened? Because the root cause for that would be you empathize with yourself and you said, this is a great product to ship. And then you realize after it's shipped, that it's not really the right thing for the end user. That is this segment. The first segment is the segment that like you and me. The second segment that I want to talk about is the underserved segment. The underserved segment is economically slightly lower than the you and me segment. They would probably be earning about 5 lakhs household income per annum. It's not like they need to sort of struggle for their day-to-day needs. Their day-to-day needs are actually taken care of. They have a roof, they have a house, they have good food, and they save up for some of the luxuries that they want, maybe like a trip or something like that. They save up and they sort of like make sure that they enjoy what they need to. But they're value conscious. They are definitely value conscious, which is for every rupee that they spend, they want to ensure they get the most out of that. That is the underserved segment. Then there is the untapped segment. Right? The untapped segment is slightly below the underserved segment in economically speaking. A larger portion of them have salaried segment, but a significant portion of them are also daily wage laborers. But they all have access to internet. They all have like smartphones, low-end entry-level smartphones. They can access internet, and they can sort of like derive value from the internet ecosystem. The last is the emerging segment. Emerging segment is mostly the feature phones, internet on feature phone. They struggle for day-to-day life. Large portion of them are daily wage laborers. Very few of them are salary income. So very little stable income. Now each of them have these unique needs, right? Now let's try and understand each of these segments a little deeper. But before we go, time for a quick question. Now, of these four segments, A, B, C, D, and E, which segment do you think is the largest segment? If you could just type it out in the chat, which is the largest segment among A, B, C, and D? A being you and me, B being underserved, C being untapped, and D being the emerging segments. I see a lot of C's, I see a lot of D. Few people saying C and D. I see people saying B and C. So largely, if I were to draw like a histogram, I guess for D, Geo is working hard. So Ajit says, yes. Yeah, we'll try and understand who is working for all of these segments. Yeah, I think largely the sense is definitely not no, I don't see anybody saying the you and me segment, which I think is like a great start. All of you already understand that that is not the largest segment, but it's also not an insignificant segment, right? The you and me segment is about 110 million users. The rest of the users, if you sort of like bucket them together, that is massive. Now you need to just look at this and then you'll immediately understand if we are earning about 7 lakh per annum, we are in the tip of the iceberg. We are already at the tip of the iceberg. Anywhere beyond this is further going up the pyramid, but you're already in the premium elite if you are in the 7 lakh rupee per annum sort of segment. There is a vast India that is below this tip of the iceberg, and that is what is powering the growth for Indian economy, right? That is the powerhouse of growth. Now we'll try and understand each of these segments slightly more deeply in the next few sort of like sessions, in the next few minutes. This is the first you and me segment, okay? You and me segment, most of them are graduates like you and me. Most of them earn like 7.5 lakh per annum annually. But this segment is not growing passively, right? This segment is like growing 4% annually. And I think the growth rate will sort of like reduce over time. The reason for reduction is the trends are mostly shifting towards fewer kids. Trends are shifting towards sort of like preferring to postpone the family expansion at a later point in time, things like that. So a lot of socioeconomic factors over here, which are contributing to a slower growth in this particular segment. And also there's obviously some aspect of this around urbanization, etc. But you need to understand that this segment is one of the hotly contested segments. Like every big brand sort of like goes after this segment. It's impossible to ignore this segment. The reason is this segment has the highest disposable income. If you're making like 7.5 lakh per annum, if you assume like 2.5 lakh rupees of expenses, that's a large pocket to go after. That's a wallet share that you want to get into. So yeah, this is largely it. Now, can you guys sort of like think about which brands and products would target this particular segment? I have a few, but I want to sort of like hear from you guys. What could be typical brands that go after this particular sort of segment? I see Ravi says Myntra, clothing, fashion, Ola. Yeah, MNC's Nika. Okay, great. Wow, I'm so happy to see a lot of thoughts that I had are sort of like resonating over here. Yeah, tourism. Yeah, tourism. Oh, yo, sure. Fintech companies. That's a great start. Yeah, fintech, some section of fintech, yes. Though I would say a large part of fintech is actually around enabling credit, which probably is not this segment. Make My Trip, Urban Company. Yeah, I think Urban Company is a great example. Urban Company focuses on this kind of a segment. They have it in their name also, Urban, right? Furniture rental is a great example again. Furniture rental, one of the necessities for them is to have like a monthly deduction from a credit card. And if you take the credit card itself, that's a very small pocket. Credit is another great example. Yeah, I think amazing. You guys have sort of like nailed it, right? These are the sort of like brands that I thought of. Myntra is obviously something that you guys said. Credit is also another thing that you said. I just thought I'll bring in certain other perspectives. Netflix, which is foraying into India, has a lot of premium content, but if you look at the content that they have, it's mostly urban kind of content. It's not like the mass masala kind of movies I would be surprised to find a Netflix movie that would have like multi-starrers and like a lot of dance numbers, etc. Very kind of a niche sort of like segment. I mean, once they sort of like capture the segment, they would definitely expand into the other segments with more content. But for now, I think Netflix is predominantly focused on this particular segment. OnePlus is another product slash brand that is focused on this. Abhishek says, how is OnePlus and not any other brand? I think a lot of others also, like Apple, Google, all of these are also sort of like focused on this particular segment. I just took OnePlus as an example because OnePlus is a flagship killer. They want to provide uh, value products, but if you see the price range that they operate in, it is now north of 33,000. So if you take OnePlus 7, OnePlus 70 Pro, or OnePlus, the latest ones, those are definitely at the higher end of the price mix. If you pick the OnePlus Nord and the lower price segment series, maybe they'll probably fall into the other segments. Cool. I see Amman says Insaid, which is an education institution, is targeting this. Great example. Cool. All right. So let's take a look at the underserved segment, right? Underserved segment is about 50% of this is grad plus. So not all of them are like us, but there are large similarities between the segment and the you and me segment. 80% of them are salaried, which was actually a very pleasant sort of like insight for me. I had actually assumed a larger portion of them would be like day-to-day earning, but actually 80% of them are salaried. And there is a little bit of credit card penetration here, right? About 3% of them have some credit card, and obviously the credit limits would be much lower. But this segment is growing aggressively. This segment is growing at 10 to 13% per annum, and 10 to 13% depending on which sort of report you consume. But the thing that you need to understand here is this is a very sticky segment. This is a segment I was talking about earlier, right? In the Ford story, once a perception is built, it's very hard to get rid of it. But also that's a double-edged sword, right? If you get it right, if you can sort of like explain what your brand stands for and what is it that you provide as a value to this customer segment, they would be willing to sort of like forgive you for small misses here and there. Let's say your product has been shipped, but let's say one of the many products is defective and you're offering to sort of like replace that or refund the money, they would be like, okay, fine, that's okay. I'll still continue to place the order. This does not break the relationship between you and me. But the interesting part is they don't consume English. This is a huge deviation between the previous and this segment. They think regional, they consume regional, they speak regional. This is I think one of you folks also mentioned vernacular, right? This is that segment. Why is the segment called underserved? Yeah, so Piyush, it's just a name that I came up with. It's not like an industry terminology. If you sort of like go to talk to somebody, I'm targeting underserved segment, I don't think anybody will understand this. The reason why I call this the underserved segment is because you have a lot of these global companies that are trying to serve this company, but they're not able to effectively build products for them. That is why I call them underserved segment. And I'm coming from Flipkart. I know that Flipkart is still trying to serve the segment, but we have a long way to go before we can sort of like completely fulfill their needs. And that is why I say underserved. So what kind of brands could be targeted by them, right? Can you sort of like think of which part of this with the entire Indian conglomerates could be sort of like focused on this? I think WhatsApp spreads across all the segments. It's not like one or two. I see Maruti, yeah, Paytm, interesting. Yeah, footwear, DMart, Meesho, interesting. Meesho is an interesting call. Yeah, consumer goods, Bata. Yeah, I think Bata is a great example. Cool. So let's just take a look at what some of the examples that I had. I think a lot of great examples. I was thinking of ShareChat and Maruti Suzuki. Yeah, so but I see a lot of great answers in the chat as well. Hero is Bajaj is a great example. Big Bazaar is an amazing example. Yeah, I think very good sort of like examples over here. Maggie is another great example. Yeah, I think you guys sort of like get the sense of what this segment is. Rahul asked why ShareChat. The reason why I'm sort of like placing ShareChat here is I think ShareChat has captured the segment very beautifully. They have more than 190 million users. A large part of them are in the underserved segment. And ShareChat is a market leader in this segment. If you want to sort of like access this customer base, ShareChat is a great way to access this particular community set of users. Why not Zomato? Sunil, I think Zomato may not be a great fit here. The Zomato, if you see the consumers of Zomato, not the delivery partners, not the restaurants, but the consumer of Zomato. There is a significant cost overhead in the product that you place. For example, there is 30 rupees of delivery charges, etc. This segment is actually very price sensitive. They would work to sort of like reduce. Maybe there could be occasional users of Zomato. Maybe occasionally they would have food outside. But I wouldn't say that they're like a primary customer cohort for Zomato. Yeah, I think Vivo is a great example. Sonali says Vivo, Motorola. I don't know about Motorola and Lenovo, but Vivo is definitely a great example. Cool. So now let's jump into the next segment. This is the Untapped segment, right? Untapped segment is probably slightly older than the other segments. Only 35% of them are millennials. 40% of them have studied only till primary. And if you assume other education levels, so they probably will get to 50%, but a large part of them are still relatively not fully educated, right? 44% of them are salaried, but 33% of them are casual labor. The rest usually try and find daily wages and try and sort of like make ends meet. What is surprising to me is they do spend about an hour on internet, which is very interesting, right? Think about this. They're trying to sort of like make ends meet, but they still have an hour for internet. Most of their internet is sort of spent on social network and entertainment. I wouldn't probably expect a lot of you to have a very clear understanding on who these people are. It's very hard unless you've sort of like gone out and empathized with them, spoken to them, or taken their phone and show me your phone and tell me what is on your phone, etc. It'll be very hard to sort of like assume what they sort of like what kind of a customer cohort they are. But if you want to take a shot at what kind of brands and companies attack this kind of a customer base, maybe I would be sort of like happy to hear. YouTube, Instagram, definitely not Instagram. I don't think so. Meesho, maybe not. Maybe Meesho through some other customer base. Remember, these people do not really understand commerce online. These people they don't spend online. They don't have wallets, etc. They might have a bank account, but it's very hard for them to set up UPI on that. Yeah, I think I'll just sort of like jump into it. So Paysense and Apna are like two massively growing companies within India. Apna, I think, is also a unicorn right now. Apna is a company that enables these customers, these users, to find jobs. Think of it as LinkedIn for this kind of customer base. There is a very clear job description, what are the expectations, what is the salary, etc. And they sort of like ensure that there is some background verification done, and there is like a lower cost of the employee acquisition for these customers. They're also not like complete formal customers. They'll be like mostly around contract sort of like work. Paysense is a company that has targeted this segment. They are into lending. They give a line of credit for them to certain extent, depending on some sort of like data, etc. So what it says, Sonu Sood is running such an agency. I'm not sure, but I guess that's an interesting take. We're just taking a look at the questions. Cool. I think these are slightly past. Okay, so I see Ranganathan's question. What is the difference between untapped and underserved segment? So I think if it's not yet obvious, if you look at this segment, right? If you look at the underserved segment, these people have slightly higher disposable incomes. Think of it as the middle class, the quintessential middle class Indian family. This is the underserved segment. The untapped segment is lower to middle class, and sort of like trying to make ends meet. This is the untapped segment, right? So that is what untapped segment does. Emerging segment is mostly casual labor sort of like workforce. They have certain phones which have internet, but 51% of them are unaware of internet. हवा ही नहीं है internet का. Like they don't know what internet is. If you tell them that you can place order and they'll deliver it to your house, they will not understand what that is. Their annual savings is less than 2,000 rupees. You really need to understand that their entire life is mostly offline. So this is the emerging segment. I was not able to think of any digital products that are defined for this customer segment, though I think this is a massively unpenetrated sort of like segment. And if there are like offline plus online or omni-channel sort of experiences for this segment, I think that kind of a product or a solution or a business model will actually find massive taking in this segment. And you will probably have no competition as well. But the flip side is very little disposable income, hardly anything to sort of like extract from in terms of like goodness or deliver value for which they can pay. So that is sort of like the take on this particular difference. I see the question from Aman, untapped and underserved segment, there should be one difference of literacy too. Yes, there is a difference in literacy too. You're right. Cool. Let's just take a look at the questions if there are any. Yeah, cool. I think largely this is it, right? Like I was thinking of non-digital targeting. This is like Dabur, Colgate, and Imami. Imami, if you guys don't know, is like a massive rural leader, right? In rural segments in the India, they have like a very large penetration, and they have like very good sort of like annual recurring income. Cool. So now we have a fairly good understanding of the four segments, right? And you can also understand why a lot of these companies that we've spoken of so far target the tip of the iceberg. They've sort of like experienced India only with the you and me segment. They built for us and it works. That's obviously not sort of like solving for the entire India. And now we need to understand how do we sort of like build for the entire India. And I see a question from Sachin. First slide, you mentioned that India has 600 million internet using internet. Does it mean the other 600 comes under emerging segment? No, Sachin, this entire segmentation is of internet users only. The other 600 do not use internet, and the other 600 would obviously include other age brackets also. Older than 60 or younger than 10, 12. Multiple other segmentations. I've sort of like limited the conversation so far only to the internet users, and even within the internet users, you can see that a large part of them are still in emerging. So to be sort of like very clear, only 400 million, 420 million, 460 million, 450 million maybe are like active internet users who can transact, who can consume, who can sort of like use internet effectively. Yeah. So if you're, let's say you're a product manager, and let's say your product has an onboarding flow, which is a sign up. You enter your name, you enter your mobile number, you get an OTP, enter the OTP, then you log in. Or if your app has account or settings, or if you sort of like have a flyout menu under which you can go and open and you can set things up and personalize. Or if your product has iconography like that search icon, you have like a magnifying glass search icon, or you have like a cart or a wish list, something like that, right? Your product is not designed for India. The Indian ecosystem, the bulk of the iceberg that we've been talking for, they don't connect with that kind of iconography. They don't connect with this very new onboarding flows and things like that. Why is that so? Right? The you and me segment is used to the desktop experience. You know what a desktop is like. You know how to navigate on a desktop. And the mobile phones are a miniature version of what we used to do on desktop. You have like navigation, you have a menu, you can scroll, there is a hidden, nested sort of like flyout menu and all of those things. You should understand that the bulk of Indian internet users do not understand that. They cannot comprehend why there is an account. What does it mean by having an account? I am already installing this app on my phone. This is me. Why should I have an account? These when you ask them what does this magnifying glass do, they don't understand magnifying glass. Who decided that magnifying glass is search? Who decided that these people have gone to a market, supermarket, that too, and have seen a shopping cart and they add things to shopping cart and then they go to checkout and then they pay and then they take those items and go? Like how can we assume that these customers understand these nuances of an app? We take this for granted. You and I probably understand, sure, this makes sense, very regular. I see search icon, I'll search. I see cart, I'll add, or I'll say buy now or check out, and all these things. These people don't. So how do you really build for them? What are the principles around which the product should be designed such that these people can consume and can sort of like tap into this growth? And that is what we're going to sort of like focus the last few minutes. I'll quickly check. Yeah, quick questions. Yeah, I think nothing major, but I'll sort of like come back to these towards the end. But now let's jump into the what are the fundamental principles that you need to sort of like build for? Like, I'm imagining you'll all be future product managers, product leaders. You get into a meeting room, some guy will come and tell, I want to put search icon. You need to stand up and tell, no, that's not acceptable for the user segment. I will not allow that on my product. And then the designer will say, why not? And then you sort of like will be able to fall back on this particular set of section that you can sort of like understand, right? So these are the companies we've sort of like discussed this high level. The case for growth is very clear. All of these brands that you're seeing on your planet, I mean, probably you might not have heard of some of these, but these are the bulwarks of growth in India, right? I admire these companies. These companies have done really well. And the reason why they've done well is this chart on the left side. If you look at the share of new customers online, right? New customers online, I say customers that started like transacting. 80% of them come from tier 2 plus towns, cities, villages. Only 20% of them come from metro, which means metro is highly penetrated. Metro is done deal. Unless you have like a super unique product like Ola Electric, Scooty or something, which has no parallel and the urban population wants to tap into it, it's very hard to penetrate this market. So what are the fundamental principles on which these companies have grown, and also what are the fundamental principles that you can take while you build products, and how can you sort of like defend your argument for this is not the right product decision or this is the right product decision? So these are the 4 pillars of crafting the right experiences for these growth segments, and I'm calling them the growth segments. Growth segment is untapped plus underserved. So these are the 2 segments I'm calling as the growth segments. And Flipkart, yes, focuses extensively on the segment. So do a bunch of the new companies that are coming in. And for me, I can tell that my life revolves around understanding these 2 user segments and coming up with solutions that can ease their life online. So what are the 4 pillars? The first pillar is rethink, like completely rethink the mobile interaction. The way you have been using mobile is not the way the segment uses. I would imagine that if anybody from this segment were to open LinkedIn, they would be confused beyond their imagination. They would be like, what is this? Why is there like a search? Why is there like a burger icon? What does it mean to say, that there is this icon? They would be sort of like confused. How do I send a friend request? How do I get a friend request from this particular community? LinkedIn is very different from Facebook. So there are certain nuances over there. Same thing applies for even Flipkart, right? If this person who has never transacted online were to open Flipkart, I would imagine that they would be confused. They would be like, what is this experience? How do I choose a particular product? How do I pay? How do I don't have a credit card, so how do I pay? When do I pay? How do I get the money? If the product is bad, how do I sort of like resolve this pain? Massive pain that these customers have, and the stress levels that they go through when they're sort of like interacting online is very high. So rethink all of that. Right? So rethink your entire app that exists. Index heavily on how they interact with your product. They cannot interact with typing. They can't type. They can't sort of like sit and type. They can't speak. They'll have to sort of like make it as natural as possible. And one of the solutions that I really admire in this space is the Google Gboard, which is the keyboard that comes with all the Android phones. If you see, there is a tiny little mic icon, and you tap and you speak, and it converts your speech into text, and the text goes into whichever text field that you're sort of entering. Beautiful interaction, right? Very delightful to understand, and you can see very easily that just that small interaction has captured the Indian ecosystem. I see almost everybody that I speak to uses this feature. It's completely native to them. The third pillar is vernacular. We'll talk about this a little later as well, but think about their regional language first. English is not the default language. The fourth is at every step, handhold them. Think of them as babies and sort of like handhold them through every step. Don't talk down to them. It's obviously not that intention, but it's to give them assurance, to sort of like ensure that they can take every step with slightly more confidence. These are the four pillars around which I want to craft our experiences, and sort of like maybe sort of like works for you as well. I'm giving certain examples here. We already spoke about rethinking iconography, but you cannot have an onboarding flow. Prove your worth. Previously, you need to sort of like onboard, and then you can prove your worth. You have some time bandwidth to establish what is the value that you bring into these users. You need to sort of your time to prove your worth to this user is much shorter. So if you install an app like Moj, right? The moment you open the app, it asks you to choose a particular language, and that's it. After that, you will see videos. You can keep scrolling and you can keep consuming videos. That's it. There is no onboarding flow. There is no account. There is no number. There is nothing. That's it. The value is over there. Don't think of like complicated interactions. Don't think of hierarchical flows. Don't hide things under nested sort of like hierarchies where you sort of like have to dig deeper to understand and find what they are. And you can see over here on the left side. So Moj has nothing hidden. If you want to share, it is over here. If you want to comment, it is over here. If you want to like, it is over here. That's it. Everything is at L0. Everything is in L0. No nested. Then speaking over typing, and the case for it is very obvious. If you want to type, it takes 3 times longer to type in Hindi. The reason is you want to type this particular string, Pila Dupatta. First, you need in the Devanagari keyboard, you have 6 panes. So you have like first is for your vowels, which is A, I, E, and then you have K, 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 then you have all for each of these sections. There is like a separate keyboard. It's not like QWERTY, right? So you need to find P, then you need to go and make it E, then you have to go back and find L, then add A, then you come back to do, the, and then put U. Very complicated. It's impossible to type. So then you need to sort of like think about tolerance levels for these, right? So if you say Pila Dupatta and it does not understand Pila Dupatta, let's say it understands Pe Jal or something like that, and the tolerance levels for this error is, I spoke once, he did not understand, I will never try again. So that user is gone. You need to ensure that we have very high level of precision. The moment they tried, it works. It should work like magic out of the box. Now the third part, right? Google Assistant is the Google Assistant is what Google sort of like has interfaced with multiple touch points in the user journey, right from search to in contextual interventions as well. Hindi was launched in Google Assistant, right? I think about a year and a half ago. And what do you think is where do you think it stands in the list of adopted languages? Like Hindi is the dash most used language in the Google Assistant globally, not just in India or in segment. I'm talking about globally. So where do you think it stands? I see 5th, I see 3rd. Can't be first because first has to be some of these global languages like English. I see 4th, I see 2nd, a few of them have told 2nd, bottom, 2nd, maybe 3rd, 4th, Malayalam, Tamil, Telugu, maybe first. No, I don't think so. The population of Hindi is much larger than Malayalam, Tamil, Telugu. So obviously Hindi has to be above those languages. Sandeep says it's in top 10. Yeah, so I think it is the 2nd most used language globally, right? For me, it was very surprising because in terms of languages spoken in the world, Hindi is not number two. In the population of the languages that is spoken all over the world, English is first. Hindi comes at like number four. But still, in Google Assistant adoption of languages, Hindi is number two. They got it right. They did get it right. So let's look at vernacular. Vernacular is the language. And I was telling right in Launch, when you sort of like install the app and open it, first thing they ask for you is sort of choose your language. The reason for that also is like they can curate the content so that your stickiness goes up. But there is a very high intent on understanding which language do you speak and which language you're comfortable in. Yeah, so now quickly, another question here. So Hindi is number four in terms of the number of speakers. But if you were to size up all the content that is available and sort of like rank it, where do you think Hindi stands? Kavita says first, Nagamoli says second, next to English, after five. I'll give you a hint. It's actually really bad, which means there is not enough Hindi content online. So it cannot be in the top 10 either, though it is number fourth spoken English. It's number fourth in terms of global speakers. See, 20. The answer is it's actually ranked 32nd, which means one of the most populated segments have the least online content. That is the problem. This consumer cannot consume English, but almost all of the content is in English or some language that they cannot understand. And that is where the power of AI and ML comes in, right? Power of AI and ML is you can take English content, translate it, and give it to them in Hindi. The problem though is the AI and ML translation results in very formal language. And that formal language does not resonate with them. It results in poor quality translation. So you need to sort of like nuance that. Now let's take a look at inspiring trust. I think one of the products that inspires this, at least for me, is the Truecaller. They do a really good job, and they do it at multiple levels. They don't just say it as spam, but they also tell how many people reported it as spam. They give usually data around how many people, when did they do, how much has it risen, what is the call activity, a lot of information that they sort of like upfront. And also the way they sort of like show this, the moment I get a call, there is a pop-up that says this is a spammy call or like that. But anyway, that aside, if you look at your products, when you're sort of like creating content, think about the touch points that the users have with your product, where they face the highest stress levels. This is usually payment to transaction, orders, order summary. After you've received an order, how do you sort of like voice your concerns? These are all the usual touch points, the usual suspects in terms of stress levels for these users. Identify those and reduce those. For example, after you've received a product, maybe a call to the user and tell, hey, did you like the product? Did you not like the product? Is there anything okay? Do you want to return? Do you want to refund? Some things like that can deliver delight. User-generated content and social proofing goes a long way, right? User-generated content is your reviews, your ratings. So maybe if I open a product page in Flipkart, helping the users see that other customers have bought it and they like it. Just showing that helps them understand that there are other people like me who have purchased. I see pictures of other people who have sort of like done this, and they're seeing that there is goodness. And just personal story, in Flipkart, when we launched this data science driven translation, we saw the biggest impact for the user generated content. That goes a long way in helping customers find other customers who have sort of used it, and they're sort of like able to relate to it. Cool. So I think with this, I want to sort of like pause. I think we are at the end. We have like 5 minutes. Credits to a lot of stuff that I found online. I think a lot of content, images, icons. It's over here. Cool. I think I'll pause here. I'll now sort of like jump back to the questions, and we'll sort of like have quickly go.
Okay. So, Pavan, first of all, thank you for the wonderful talk. And I think a lot of effort must have gone into kind of extract all of these numbers and figuring out all the details, right? And I think, friends, this is something that we can learn firsthand from Pavan, that if you really want to be a great PM, okay, you should know your numbers well enough. Anything that you want to launch, anything that you want to kind of create, if you don't understand the dynamics of it from a very mathematical, numerical perspective, okay, you cannot quantify anything. Okay? So till you can't quantify, it's just subjective. So overall, I think this was possibly the most value add that we got from your session, Pawan, that how deep you should be in your research methodologies and how quantitative in nature should it be. So now moving on to the question is, first of all, after the wonderful talk, I think people would have tons of questions, and I already see there are quite a few which we have not been able to address so far. So I'll just make it a little easier, and I'll pick up some of the questions, and possibly you can address those questions, because I think there are too many questions which we can't address in the I mean, the best interest of time. I'll try to isolate and give you the right ones. Yeah, I mean, almost 230 plus participants so across different channels, so it's going to be a little difficult to address every question. Yeah, so okay. So first question that I have is, since you hail from Flipkart, which segment is Flipkart specifically catering to? Like, is it all across the board, or it's just the ABC category?
No, we're focused extensively on untapped and underserved segments. There is no doubt about that. We want to be the value champions, and we already see that the majority of our customers come from the segment. So it makes complete sense for us to be focused on that segment.
And currently, like with a major shift happening in the millennial mindset, right? Millennials and zillennials. So how is Flipkart poised to kind of cater to them?
So millennials is another different segment. I think I would probably segment it in a different dimension.
Well, they clearly wouldn't fall in this pyramid, right? They would have a separate group altogether.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely right. So I think in terms of age demography, Flipkart also has a much more younger audience, and we sort of see that even in millennials, underserved, and undertapped, also we see a lot of adoption. In fact, my favorite sort of like anecdote is when I was interacting with, as part of user research, we go out and talk to these customers and understand what they do, right? So in one of them, I was speaking to a guy. He was from Muzaffarnagar, and he was telling me, "तो मैं Flipkart से काफी खरीदता हूँ." And then I asked him, "अच्छा तो और बताइए, what do you like, what do you not like?" And he opened his orders page, and there were like 30 orders in the last 15 days. He had purchased more from Flipkart than I did, and the reason for that is he's an influencer in his small network, right? He has a network of some 20, 30 friends, and for in that group of friends, he's like an influencer, and he places a lot of places a lot of orders on Flipkart, which is very interesting. And that's when I sort of like understood that if you solve for the underserved and untapped segments, you probably are covering for some aspects of the coming of age millennials as well. So you solve for them, you solve to the point that you're sort of like including a lot more people in the solution that you're going to. So you don't exclude any of the segments.
So now, considering, I mean, that's just a follow-up question. Considering, like, when you get into a particular segment, there could be so much of secrets hidden in those segments, and you start uncovering for those segments. Don't you run the risk of missing out a bigger opportunity in any other segment?
No, you're absolutely right. Right. I think very good question also. And if you take a step back, and if I were to think like Flipkart CEO, right, the way I see is there are multiple solutions to each of these segments. So if you see the premium ecosystem, there is Myntra already at play. So Myntra sort of caters to the you and me segment. Flipkart is not designed for that, but yeah, they'll sort of surface that as well. At the tail end, where you sort of like at looking at emerging plus untapped economies, there we have Shopsy, which is like more around reseller commerce, social commerce, focusing more on that. And in the bulwark of sort of like the middle segments, that is where Flipkart is like well positioned to sort of like take the lead. Not necessary that all the companies need to adopt the same strategy, but this gives each of the leaders in each of these segments to focus on that particular segment and deliver the most value. If you're sort of solving for all the segments, you're not solving for anybody. But having said that, if your product is very simple to use, very intuitive, very easy, no nonsense, reduces a lot of confusion, inspires a lot of trust, I see no reason why the you and me segment should not use that kind of a product. And case in point is Moj and Josh and all of these apps that are sort of like doing well even in the metro parts.
So, I mean, coming to the next point, which is around the user behavior. So, considering like back here in India, people are like afraid of paying online, right? So COD in tier three, tier four cities, okay. Is that something that Flipkart really prefers, or is it like there's a change in mind shift currently which we are not aware of right now?
Oh, you're absolutely right. I think COD is, if COD weren't there, we couldn't tap into this market. Like that's no question, right? COD eases a lot of pain. You're right. It takes the pressure of paying online, and hence I can place an order. I can give the money. Since I'm giving the money, it feels like I'm actually paying, which is really sort of like soothing to the this kind of a customer cohort. But I do see certain trends which could indicate to change in the future. I see that UPI has taken over significantly. We see that digital payments are sort of like coming of age. If you were to ask me this question maybe 2 years ago, I would say COD is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. Uh, Credit cards will never penetrate this kind of segment, so we will never have that as a primary payment instrument. And I see COD forever. At this point in time, I don't think I can make that statement. I do see that probably COD could reduce over in the future. Maybe UPI could take over. Maybe COD will be reduced to a certain segments who are like absolutely new to online commerce and they're sort of like coming online for this.
Yeah, I think it's only a matter of time when the fintech companies figure out a little more creative way of solving this problem. In fact, M-Pesa in Africa was a great case study. So I think Kavita, you might want to check up on that. So M-Pesa is the one that kind of changed the dynamics of how do you pay in Africa. So I mean, they didn't even need internet connection there. So that's how simple they made the entire scope of payments.
Absolutely.
So, yep. So coming to the next question, which is the most important question, possibly everybody is waiting to hear from you, which is how do you research and figure out these numbers? So, what is your secret?
So yeah, I think I'll tell you. I think of the insights that I've had in this, the first is sort of like to get out there. Right? I think I really like to go out there and talk to customers. If I'm sitting in an auto, I sort of like after the auto ride is done, I usually walk around and say, "Hey, can you show me your phone? Can we talk about this or something like that?" And sort of like there are people around us. You can talk to them to gather this kind of an insight. What that will then do is you start having this mental map of different types of customer personas based on your real world interactions, and you can sort of like put a picture to each of these conversations that you've had. The next step is to understand which of these personas do I need to really solve for. Like, should I pick the auto driver that I spoke to yesterday, or should I talk to that person? Should I pick the persona of the seller that I met in Ahmedabad, or should I pick this person I met in Tirupur or Trichy? So that question again comes back to sort of like numbers, and that will sort of like come from internal, external, first party, second party, third party reports. A lot of the data is available online. You can just type like internet users in India and type is equal to PDF in Google, and you'll find like a ton of research. But the thing is, don't pick any particular report and say this is it. This is the truth, and I will sort of follow this to the letter. I have found a lot of reports are contradictory in nature. Some of them have different estimates. In fact, even the numbers that I shared may not be entirely accurate, but that's not the point. The point is not to be accurate. It's not to say that 110 million is the size of you and me segment. No, maybe it is 115, maybe it is 120. That's not the point. It can be off by 10-15%, but you get a general sense of what is the size of the segment, what is the general income for this. That'll help you sort of like prioritize which segment you want to go after. So a little bit of qualitative research, a lot of quantitative, and sort of like marrying them together to arrive at the story that you want to project within internal stakeholders. Also sort of like paint a clear picture of who you're solving for.
Absolutely. I mean, as you rightly pointed out, today it's with likes of Google. I mean, getting data has become so simple. And however, reports by itself are not, they'll not solve your problem. It is primarily when you go and meet the end user and you talk to them and collect some more information that supports those reports. Then you can believe those reports.
Absolutely, yeah.
So yeah, I think life of a PM is definitely pretty tough because a lot of people only see the shinier side of it, but a lot of people don't realize. In fact, I recall Google had this product that they wanted to launch here in India, so they had to send a team all from different parts of the world. So they actually got in people from different parts of the world, and they had to literally travel to rural India, where they had no idea what are they doing. They had no internet connection. They were like all confused, like how do people stay here? Okay, because for them this was a total different new picture altogether. So, but these guys were the actual PMs who were developing that product. So they had to get a first-hand view of what this user base is like. So coming to that question, Pawan, that let's say you reach out to a certain user base. Now, are there any scientific sampling techniques that you follow, or is it like you just reach out to folks, do your observations, write it down, or do you actually use some sort of statistical methods to kind of gauge if your decision is actually correct, or there could be a minor off here and there?
Great question. I think I'll sort of like break this into the purpose of the sampling, right? I'll sort of like break this into how we're sort of like going to, how are we going to use this analytical method, whichever analytical method it is, sampling or test or whatever it is. If the decision is around priority, if the decision is which segment do I go after, we don't do that often. We do it once in a while. Once we sort of like identify which persona, which segment we want to go after, we're really clear about it. We just put our heads down and start executing towards that segment. That happens once in a while. Usually, there is like a strategy team or a leadership team that will help you with that. And as a product manager, I sort of like partner with them. I don't lead that part of prioritization at a company level. But then as a PM, there are a lot of prioritization that I need to do in my domain. For example, I'm a vernacular product lead. My life revolves around prioritization around things like, let's say, which language do I want to launch? Do I want to launch Hindi? Do I want to launch Tamil, Telugu, Malayalam, Gujarati, Marathi, and the list goes on. Which language do I pick? I don't need to do any sampling here. I don't need to do a lot of testing here. I can just look up Wikipedia, look at what is the population sizes. We can also look at what is the internet user population on these, a lot of data available. And there the prioritization becomes very simple. I know what sort of like, also if you sort of like break down, you can bulk some of these users. For example, I can assume that people who speak Rajasthani, Marwadi, Bhojpuri may be comfortable with Hindi. It's an assumption I'm willing to make. It is a leap of faith, but it's a leap of faith that is necessary. We cannot wait to validate each of these smaller assumptions in the hope that we get it absolutely right. And that's a culture within Flipkart as well. There is a bias for action. We need to execute really fast. So we wait for the bare minimum data that is needed to take that particular decision and then just sort of like jump into it. So that is the prioritization. The second is experimentation. That is where the statistical significance becomes important. Experimentation is we're launching a feature. We want to validate if that is helping this user segment or not, right? The way this usually happens is it is through A/Bs. I'm guessing a few of you would be aware, maybe have conducted a few of these analysis in the past. We have like a test and a control. We expose the test to the new experience, and control is what is currently existing. We look at what is the difference in some of the key success metrics that we have defined. And if that success metric has sort of like moved and it has moved meaningfully, we'll assume that the test is successful. We'll roll it out. And sometimes the test is not successful. We roll it. We don't sort of like roll it out. We kill that product. And while this sounds very numerical, very, very set in stone, there's a very clear go, no go criteria. I think the art of setting up the experiment is what do you learn from that experiment, and how do you ensure that the learning from this experiment persists across future sort of variations, and are you deriving enough meaning and enough value from that particular experiment? That is, I think, the art which will probably come after getting a few failures, and I have quite a few failures to sort of like talk about.
I think without failures, you never learn, right? So that's actually something really good to happen to somebody when you actually know that something has failed. So Pavan, coming a little more specific to your role, right? So something like you are dealing with vernaculars. Now, a larger segment of this audience is very sensitive. So in case it's like they are not understood properly, they tend to not use the app any further, right? So you have to heavily rely on translation services from different companies. Now the challenge here that lies is with the numerous number of products that keep getting added over and over again. Okay, how do you ensure that the quality of translation and the vernaculars are met in the right way or not?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Um, when we
Like,
launched,
is there a feedback mechanism or is there a kind of testing, thorough testing before you even launch a single product? Because you're selling millions of products. You can't just
yeah,
test every product, right?
yeah, absolutely right. I think maybe I can sort of like talk about some aspects of this. Um, there are some, and it's also a journey, right? I don't think we've completely got it right. I think we're still sort of like in the journey of getting it right, at least internally from like process perspective, people perspective. There is still some sort of like maturity that we are sort of like getting to. But from the end consumer perspective, that is where the true pain of not getting translation right resides, right? Um, I would recommend that in the beginning, if you have the wallet, invest to ensure that you don't have the mistakes that are going to happen. Like try and invest to avoid these mistakes. If that means increased headcount for doing like 100% quality check of whatever the machine translation throws out, maybe you have to go through that. Only after we are sure that this product has reached uh, precision at scale and has consistently delivered on this precision, do we actually taper down on QC? And we sort of like reduce it to ensure that we are not caught unaware. We know that the machines don't change as much, but what could change is the user input. For example, search strings are translated. Uh, when you type something like pila dupatta, which is from an example, it needs to be translated to yellow dupatta internally, so that we can sort of like search our tech stack. So while this translation might not change, it is possible that the search strings change over time. They could be seasonal. Maybe the data that I trained my model on was during December, when it was mostly for like Diwali and that kind of data, whereas maybe it does not work for Holi and that kind of festive season. I don't know. So for that, to avoid being caught unaware, we will ensure that we will do a little bit of QC all the time. Though the the domain that we are in, if the precision doesn't change massively over time.
Wonderful. So I think the key takeaway is basically you have to keep improving continuously, and there's no one right answer.
Yeah.
And the problem is the same statement might have different interpretations in different seasons. So I think, friends, I mean, this is something that is really awesome that Pawan just pointed out, that a lot of PMs think that you have to get it right the first time. Rarely does it work because, I mean, perceptions, mindsets, they keep changing, they keep altering, and you can never catch hold of it. It's like you're running behind something that is never going to get caught. So at the end of the day, it's all about how often are you tweaking your systems, how frequently are you trying to adapt to that situation, and how quickly are you changing the way you're working. So that's something that would really help us. Now, Deepa, Flipkart is a B2C company. So Pawan comes from B2C. So obviously his examples are from B2C. But however, Pawan, Deepa has a question around, like, do you have some ideas about localization of vernaculars being used in B2B?
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I do have. I'm currently in vernacular, which is only about 1 year. But before my stint here, I was actually in the supply side of ecosystem for Flipkart. Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, there was a small break in between. So, Pawan, before you head for that answer, friends, please don't confuse. The classes that were scheduled at 11 o'clock have been moved to 11:30. Okay, only for the ones whose classes were scheduled. If you didn't have any class at 11, do not worry. It's only for the folks whose classes are scheduled at 11 that has been rescheduled to 11:30. Okay, and once we are done with Pawan's session, you start with your class. All the folks who are at the 11 slot have to start their class at 11:30. Okay, sorry to disturb you, Pawan. Go ahead.
That's it. Yeah. So I think Deepa had a question on B2B. So I was just talking about my personal journey here in Flipkart. Only in the last 1 year, I've been in the consumer side. But before that, I was actually in the supply side. In supply side, we mostly work with sellers to improve their sales, and sellers usually are fairly large organizations or medium sort of organizations. They're SMBs mostly. So that is a little bit of SMB experience and B2B experience that I have. Is there a specific question that you want to talk about the growth in that particular? Because I think the challenges that we face in the consumer side are not the same challenges that this segment or this community of users face.
So possibly, I mean, let's pick up any one part of it, like possibly a major challenge that you face, something like for B2C segment for localization or for vernacular, the kind of challenge that you face. So did you face anything similar on the B2B side as well?
So if you take a step back, right, what does vernacular solve for? Vernacular solves for comprehension. Comprehension is when you sort of like consume content, are you able to assimilate and understand what is that you just consume? That problem is universal. That problem is true for you and me as well. When you read a very complicated Wikipedia article on, let's say, black holes or something like that, obviously comprehension is a problem there. This problem is more profound in the B2B segment in the context of the complexities that exist in a B2B setting. In a B2B setting, there are legal challenges, there are technical difficulties, there are process challenges. I'll just give you an example. Sellers invert their consignment, their products into Flipkart warehouse, from where Flipkart can dispatch those products easier, right? Sounds very simple, but for this to happen, the seller needs to identify which products need to go in, right? They can't sell a product that is not selling because it's not useful for them. They'll have to pay rent unnecessarily for the Flipkart warehouse. And for Flipkart also, they could have probably stored a much more higher selling product instead of that low selling product. Identification is a huge problem. How will sellers discover which products need to be sold, which should not be inverted? After that comes a legal problem, which is the seller has a designated legally binding area of doing business. His GST is registered in Delhi. Now my warehouse is in Bangalore. So seller needs to register Bangalore also, and specifically Flipkart warehouse as another place of doing business, register GST, bunch of things need to happen. And then they're legally allowed to invert their content into us. And this process is not easy, and it's not even controlled by Flipkart or by the seller. There is a third party, which is government involved over here. So the complexities there are far more profound. And I don't think technology has advanced to the extent to sort of like replace account managers. I think we still rely heavily on account managers to navigate these complicated scenarios. Can be solved with technology, which is some aspects of, hey, I don't know where my money is. Has my money been settled to me as a seller? I want to check that. There we definitely invest in local content, regional content, where they can sort of like consume quick help, self-help guides, interlinking them, deep linking them into the seller dashboard, things like that.
Awesome. I mean, it's a really insightful idea that you shared, Pavan. Technically, I mean, fundamentally, most of the problems they kind of have the similar idea, be it in B2B or B2C space. It's just the way you solve those problems tend to get a little more complex when multiple parties are involved, especially governments. And I think, but overall, Flipkart has done a tremendous job in kind of solving those problems that are related back in India. In fact, Flipkart started way early in the early 2000s, I would say. So in the 2000s, when the idea of internet was just growing, when the idea of mobiles being used for doing online transactions was just taking off. So it was like pretty early phase, and Flipkart did face a lot of challenges back then, and they must have done a tremendous job to come so far. So I think we have way over time, Pavan, but I would still like to ask you one last question, if that's fine with you.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so this is a little funny question by Naga. So Naga says, which e-commerce platform do you like the most and why? And I know the answer though. Go ahead.
It's a tough one, actually, to be honest. I think if I were to give you a very honest and brutally honest answer, during festive season, I like to purchase from Flipkart. But for products that are difficult to get, I probably look it up on Amazon.
I think that's a pretty honest answer, Naga, for you. So the why part is primarily on I would say the tail end products. That's something that would differentiate the two platforms. But again, at the end of the day, since it's India Product Week, I would any day want to promote Indian companies. So please, Naga, please buy from Flipkart.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay. So anyway, I think that's all from our end, and we got to kind of stop the session now. We already 20 minutes past our time. But thank you, Pavan, for making some time on a weekend. I understand this is your day when you relax, but the whole point of you coming out and helping share your knowledge with all of us here, that really makes it wonderful, all of us. Again, we are on behalf of Insaid and all the participants here, we express our sincere gratitudes. And as a small token of appreciation, we are going to send out a small certificate to you over your email. So we would love to host you sometime in the future as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sucheta. It was an amazing session. I really loved the interactions. I think questions were amazing. So you have a great cohort of students. Wish you all the best.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the students itself actually make it all the more exciting with the kind of question that they ask. So definitely, it's a big hands on to all the students as well for the wonderful question that you posted for one. So friends, before we wrap up, one final thing: please make sure you use the hash Insaid link on your LinkedIn accounts and post a gratitude message to Pavan. Be connected to Pavan, learn from Pavan. He can be found very easily on LinkedIn as well, and we already shared you the details as well in the LinkedIn handlers. So please make sure that all of you kind of have use all the information that we have covered over this entire week, all the ideas that we have learned from all the 7 awesome speakers, an entire week long of valuable knowledge, and that's something that you don't get easily every day. Okay. So please make sure if you value this knowledge and make the most out of it. So Pavan, sorry?
Can you run a poll just to get some?
Oh, yes. I'm extremely sorry. I forgot to kind of run this. Okay. Yeah. So, friends, Pavan has a small request for all of you, and I'm sorry I don't have the poll ready with me right now. But can you all, on a scale of 1 to 5, can you all please rate this session? We'll just capture the numbers that you write in. So on a scale of 1 to 5, please rate. Okay, 10 is too big for 5, but yeah, it's 1 to 5. Yeah. Okay, so Pavan, I think you have gotten a glimpse of. Okay, I don't see. Okay, I don't see anything that I need to tell you separately, but yeah, it was an.
Yeah, thank you so much, folks. Yeah, I think this feedback really helps me.
Nothing better than this that we could have kind of had on the last day of our India Product Week. A session loaded with not only a lot of knowledge, but the kind of thinking and the thought process that you shared, that was also awesome. The way you kind of talked about how India is progressing, that is awesome. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people here would be working or would end up working in companies that are solving for India. And that in itself makes it awesome. So thank you, friends. Thank you, Pavan. It was great hosting all of you. And let's hope we can all make the most of all the knowledge that we have gathered here in today's session. Thank you. See you. Bye. Bye, Pavan.
Bye, Sujit.
Yeah, take care. Bye. You may all terminate your sessions now. We are done for today. Thank you.